Welcome back to PTP Program02 Payroll. Version 2 will add a loop to the payroll program. Recall our programming problem. We wanted to create a payroll program to generate employee pay stubs. Notice the changes we've made to the problem. This program will generate all employee pay stubs based on the number of workers that the accounting clerk enters. We will be using a pre-test loop. The while or the for would work in this circumstance. We will show an example of doing this using a while loop. We need to enter the number of workers to be processed, and we will need to set a counter. Then we will loop one time through the processing for each worker. We'll set a count variable to 0, and we'll get the number of workers variable value as keyboard input from the accounting clerk. We will check, is the count less than the number of workers? So long as that is true, we will process the workers' information and generate their pay stub. Here is the started program. You can download and replace your Payroll.java file in your payroll project. Let's skip over to the code. Here is the program started for you. We see that we've added two integer variables, one for the number of workers, the second for the count. Scrolling down, we see that there's a system.out.println banner announcing that this is the Camden County College Cyber Cafe payroll processing program, and then asking the accounting clerk to enter how many workers they need to process. Recall the name of our scanner object is keyboard, so we will set the number of workers to the keyboard.nextInt. We've already decided that we will use a while loop for this example. So while the count is less than the number of workers, and remember we're starting our count at 0, then we are going to process that worker. Now we're going to need braces here at the beginning and end of the while loop. And the while loop will include all of that information that we asked about the user. We add our increment right after we're finished figuring out the pay rate. And then we process the pay stub and then close the while loop. One of the nice features of NetBeans is when we highlight the brace, it will show us up above the matching open curly brace. So we see that we are matching our closing brace with our opening brace for the while loop, which is exactly what we want to do. In the pay stub, I've added a line here that shows the employee number. The employee number will be incremented for each employee. So our first employee will be employee 1, our second worker will be employee 2, etc. Checking our 3 golden rules before we run the loop. We have our count set to 0. We gather input from the user as to the number of workers. So before we execute that while loop the first time, we know that we have valid input for the count and the number of workers. We also verify that in the body of the loop, we've updated the condition variable count. If we forget to do this, we will start a loop and we'll never get out of it. And we'll demonstrate that in a little bit. We see the banner for Cyber Cafe, and then the question, how many workers do you need to process? Let's keep this simple. We're only going to try to process 2 workers. Looks like we have a problem here. What is the employee's name? And then it asks right away, how many hours did they work this week? So we did not get the chance to enter the worker's name. I'm going to enter 20 hours. and $8 for a pay rate. When we ask for the next worker, we see we have this problem again. What is the employee's name and her hours worked this week? Employee number 1 doesn't even have a name, and I think that's going to happen to employee 2 as well. So I'm just going to enter some information here and go back and see how do we fix this problem. Notice we had 2 employees, we printed the 2 pay stubs, and then the program exited. So that part looks good. The problem we're having is we didn't get the opportunity to enter the employee's name. Scrolling up, I would never expect you to find this problem, and this is why I embedded it in this programming example. The problem here is that when we read in the number of workers using NextInt, we type that number in and we hit the Enter key. Java holds on to that Enter key because it's not part of the integer 2 that we typed in. The next thing we attempt to enter at the keyboard is the name. The keyboard.nextLine grabbed that Enter key that was still sitting in the input stream and used that for the name. We absolutely don't want that to happen. So here's one way we can fix it. If you're going to enter numeric data, as we did for number of workers, followed by some type of string input, as we're trying to do with the name, we need to add a keyboard.nextLine. Now this is going to read that Enter key and remove it from the stream. So when we get to entering the name, the Enter key won't be there anymore and we'll get the opportunity to type the name of the employee. Okay, let's try this out. Run the program again. Let's process 3 workers. The employee name, let's make this Larry. Hours, 35. Pay rate, 10. Larry looks good. But we've got this problem again. The reason we have this problem again is just like before. The last thing that was read in was Larry's hourly pay rate. The Enter key stayed in the input stream before we go to read the name for the second employee. So we'll need to fix that one as well. So after we enter the employee's pay rate, because we are going to loop back up here and read in their name again, we need another keyboard.nextLine. Let's run the program. This time we should be just fine. We'll process 3 workers. Larry, 35-hour worker, $10 per hour. And we see it seems to be working better now. What is the employee's name? Mo. Worked 40 hours at $10 an hour. And Curly. Poor Curly. Had to work 45 hours. Well, at least he'll get some overtime. Okay. Quick recap. We added a loop so we could process many employees. We made sure that we had a valid exit condition for our loop right here, where we checked was count less than number of workers. Before we get to that loop the first time, we made sure that we had count set to 0 and we got input from the user for the actual number of workers. Loop rule number 3. After we processed the employee's gross pay, we incremented the count. To show the individual employees, we added that count to the pay stub. I'm going to run this program one more time without the count being incremented. This is a common mistake programmers make when they're first learning how to write loops. So let's take that loop rule number 3 out of there, run this program. Let's just process 2 workers. We'll name them Oops. and I goofed. Now we said 2 workers, but you'll notice they're asking us for the next worker. You'll also notice that the employee number for oops and I goofed is 0. So we've created the infinite loop condition where we got into this loop and we have no way to exit it. Why? Because count with a value of 0 will always be less than 2. I'm going to stop the process. So if this happens to you, you can use the stop process, the little red button here, that will automatically stop the program. So this demonstrates how important loop rule number 3 really is. We've got to be sure that somewhere in the body of the loop we change the condition variable's value. Recapping, we added a while loop to our payroll program. We investigated the problem of input streams, and after entering numeric data, if we try to read a string with a next line, the enter key is still sitting in the stream, so we may need to add an extra read of the next line to absorb that enter key before reading a string. Happy Java coding!